Tonight, Sleepy Histories drifts to 13th century Tuscany, where hilltop fortresses and slender tower houses rise over olive groves and cypress valleys, and a learned traveler in service to noble patrons finds the first soft warmth of hospitality after crossing the Alps. For more quiet histories, a gentle like and subscribe helps the journey continue. In the comments, what detail of a Tuscan night, painted walls, tiled hearths, or bells over rosemary, stirs the most restful imagination? The high passes release their grip slowly, and our traveler moves from hard glitter to softened light as the path winds down from snow and granite into gentler green-brown folds. Wind thins, and the hiss of sleet becomes the rill of meltwater threading meadows where late flowers cling to turf and the bells of pack animals answer one another across switching paths. Stone markers, worn smooth by generations, guide the descent past shrines tucked into ledges and cottages shingled with larch, until chestnut woods take the place of stunted pines. The air gathers warmth and fragrance. Crushed needles give way to dry grass, then to dust with a pale bloom that clings to robes and to the leather of bags stuffed with letters and small books. At each bend, the horizon loosens, revealing long-backed hills stepping away toward a hazy south, their slopes combed into terraces that carry vines and low olive trees with silvery leaves shimmering under the sun. By the time river water gleams between alders, the road has broadened into a surface of beaten earth and old paving, and the sound of iron-shod hooves is matched by the murmur of voices in a dialect stretched and softened by distance. Over the first Tuscan ridges, towns appear as crowns of stone, lifted clear of their fields and circled by walls that catch the light like bands of pale honey. Above those rings rise narrow towers, squared and stubborn, clustering where families stake presence as much as protection, their heights a ledger of lineage and credit as well as vigilance. The gates are deep-breathed vaults between flanking turrets with slots for beams and the faint memory of chains, and the parapets carry the rhythmic teeth of crenellations, as if the skyline itself were patterned for watchful repose. Markets spill just within those openings, yet from the road the first impression is of stone resolved into order, circuits drawn to define a citizen body, towers gathered to mark households whose commerce sustains the grandeur. Later historians have traced this rhythm between defense and display with patient clarity. Philip Jones, in a study of the Italian city-state published in 1997, describes how communes matured under the pressure of trade and rivalry, raising walls and towers as expressions of corporate power, while merchant families translated wealth into vertical stone. Jean Mesqui, writing in 1991 on the evolution of castles and enclosures, situates such urban defenses within a longer transformation from feudal strongholds toward more complex fabrics of fortification that shelter administration and daily life as much as arms. David Friedman's examination of later building practices, printed in 1988, reveals how domestic towers and urban palaces, already visible in the 13th century, were shaped by statutes, property lines, and the desire to fold business and household under the same roof, giving architecture a civic grammar as much as a military one. The traveler notes how these fortresses differ from the northern keeps seen earlier on the road, where moats and mottes declare separation and stone sits dark against damp fields. Here, even the most martial lines are moderated by light surfaces and tiled crowns. The towers are narrow but not sullen, and in their upper stages open arches hint at rooms meant for talk, counting, and supper as much as watch. Walls bind not a lone lord but a community, with streets running straight into gatehouses and houses leaning together in blocks as if defense and daily movement were made to interlock. In the countryside around each height, lesser strong places show a similar temper. Manors squared with low curtain walls, barns tucked into angles, and a timber gallery or a covered stair rising to a hall where shutters stand ajar for air. The logic is practical. Stone for safety, height for message, tile for weathering. But the effect is almost sunlit hospitality, a language of masonry that invites entry at measured times rather than banishing the world. Where northern towers crowd their hearths in inner angles, these Tuscan houses open rooms to light through arched windows and sometimes carry loggias under eaves, a balcony of work and relief above the courtyard. In such forms, the city's governance and the household's comfort do not wage a contest. They mingle, each modulating the other until even guard rooms receive light, and the counting bench rests near a painted wall. By late afternoon, a fortified manor on a slope just short of a town offers lodging, its warm stone rising from a terrace laced with rosemary and low walls supporting figs. A square enclosure protects a small court where a cistern cover sits polished by hands, and along one side runs a block of rooms with terracotta roofs and a stair that turns gently to a covered landing. The steward's greeting is measured and courteous, the sort given to a traveler known to serve noble patrons, and the gate closes with a timber's final, hollow comfort rather than a clatter. Within, a tiled hearth holds an even bed of coals, and the hood above it shows faint traces of ochre patterns, vines, and simple borders patiently brushed onto plaster. Benches line the walls, and a long chest holds textiles. A narrow window, splayed for light, catches the last sun and sets motes wandering through a still interior scented with oil and smoke. Supper arrives without ceremony. Good bread with a crust that snaps, a dish of olive oil green as shade, a round of firm cheese, and a clay flask of wine the color of late leaves, mellow and low in edge. From the arches that open onto the court, the night air comes up carrying rosemary, pressed earth cooling after the day, and far below, bells from a valley church stepping through a measured sequence that sets a rhythm to the house's breathing. The traveler eats without haste, and the hall answers with small sounds. The stir of coals when the hook is shifted, a pitcher moved across wood, the soft tread of someone carrying a folded cloth across the floor of brick. Above the landing, a narrow tower room promises a bed and a view. Its wooden ceiling rests on squared beams, and its walls, though simple, carry a frescoed stripe in red that marks a height for hanging gear. In the court, a groom leads a small mule to water, and the animal's bridle answers with a chime, subdued and companionable, while beyond the wall, a line of cypresses inclines to the faint sea breeze that reaches this far inland at dusk. A watchman makes a round on the parapet, the steps not militant but regular, and his silhouette drifts along the merlons against a sky that keeps a narrow band of copper past the western hills. This strong place is not an island but a hinge, turning the movements of fields, road, and town into a sheltered domestic rhythm where guests are kept, ledgers are stored, and news is received with the same composed gravity as grain. Though the tower's stair is steep, its treads are burnished, and the door latch smooth in the hand, signs of daily use rather than alarm. In the margin of his mind, the traveler takes measure of how stone has been persuaded into welcome here, how a place built for keeping also keeps watch over rest. Night settles like a cloth drawn across a table, folding corners of courtyard and hill into one another, until only the outline of the tower and the paler band of the path remain. Through an open arch, a lizard-warm sill exhales the day's heat, and the rosemary hedge releases a peppery sweetness that rises and then thins, as if following the bells as they travel away. The sky shows more stars than recent nights allowed, and in their scattered company the tower house seems less vertical assertion than lantern, gathering a small household of light within its upper rooms. Voices pass softly on the landing, a few words about accounts to be fetched on the morrow, a question about the well, and a latched chest answers with a muted click. He stretches near the tiled hearth while embers rearrange themselves, and the painted border on the wall takes on a dusky glow, the pigments breathing as the fire sinks. Far off, a dog's bark arrives in 2 faint pulses, and then even that trace is taken up by the long hush that follows, a stillness not empty, but composed. In this first steadied pause of the journey, stone, tile, and night air interlace, and the road beyond the gate becomes merely a quiet line waiting for dawn. Dawn. The hill town rises from its ridge like a thicket of stone trunks, each tower drawing the eye upward to a quiet geometry against the pale sky. Set upon the spine of the hill, the outer walls bend and straighten in measured arcs, adapting to rock and slope with a mason's patience, while crenellations line the summit paths where watchmen pace at an unhurried rhythm. Narrow arrow loops puncture the curtain stones at steady intervals, and corbelled machicolations project where corners invite caution, reminding the passer that vigilance and prudence have long kept company here. Some merlins end in squared shoulders, others taper to swallowtail forks, and together they read like family signatures inscribed in silhouette, a language of security that the town has spoken for generations. Within the skyline, towers range from stout keeps to slender spines, sometimes joined to adjoining houses, sometimes freestanding like milestones of lineage and credit, and their stacked openings grow from slits near the base to broader windows near the top, where air and light are safest. The traveler pauses to consider the placing of every threshold and stair, how a doorway sits just above street level behind a retractable ladder, or how a small postern slips into a garden terrace, noting habits learned on the harsher stones of northern castles, but softened into civility by sun and trade. Under the afternoon's even glow, the town's lineaments state plainly that survival has been an art as much as a duty, and that art has been shaped by the realities of counting rooms, cargo animals, and kin. Approach brings the main gate into view, a deep arch layered with timber leaves and iron studs, turning the incoming path once or twice so that carts must slow and voices carry to a porter's niche. Above it, a wall walk stretches between squat towers, their parapets thick enough to cast shade, and the sound of boots on flagged stone echoes softly along the crest. Within the threshold, the street shelf narrows and tilts, lanes climbing and folding upon themselves to tame the slope. And at intervals, an open loggia provides a breath of space where artisans trade words and wares under sheltering arcs. Breezes slip between walls that lean inward by a finger's measure, gathering scents of pressed olive, damp mortar, and green cypress. And along the eaves, rosemary grows in clay jars, so that a resinous freshness mingles with the dust of trodden limestone. Courtyards open with little warning, some no larger than a cart's turning, some broad enough to hold a cistern and a fig tree. And always there is a wellhead, its rope warm to the touch, and its groove polished by many hands. At street corners, half arches and buttresses tether one house to another like clasped fingers, allowing narrow vaults to bridge the way and keeping wind and masonry in friendly conversation. The traveler notes that such passages create small climates of their own, cooler in the day and storing warmth as evening approaches, an urban fabric arranged to cradle movement, guard exchanges, and ease the business of living behind stout walls. Towers serve more than watch and refuge here. They are columns of remembrance and promise, stones laid as carefully as accounts kept at a counting bench. Many stand upon basement vaults with thick piers and barrel arches, a ground level with no more than a guarded hatch to the street. The real entry raised a story above where a short stair or timber bridge could once be withdrawn in uncertain hours. Living floors climb from there, each with a fireplace set into a hooded niche, and sometimes a small latrine turret juts outward, cleverly ducted to keep the interior clean. Above, a loft opens to the rafters, storing cloth bales or grain, a quiet guarantee against lean seasons. The masonry reveals a discipline learned over generations. Rougher blocks anchor the base, while the upper stages carry finely dressed ashlar laid in steady courses, their mortar joints thin and precise, and at intervals, a string course marks a change in height or phase of work, an architectural punctuation. Windows widen with altitude, evolving from defensive slits to paired arches divided by a slender column, and shutters fold back to admit a tempered light that has brushed the same lintels through centuries of summers. Across the lanes, fortified palaces broaden the pattern, their street fronts proud with rings of bosses and splayed arrow slits, while interiors pivot around loggias and stair courts, where light falls like a beneficent order onto daily tasks. The traveler reads these facades the way a banker reads tallies, seeing where fortunes rose, where kin merged, where a statute once trimmed a tower's ambition and forced builders to pour pride into breadth and finish. In this ledger of stone, architecture serves commerce as much as defense, offering storage close to the market, rooms for negotiation within earshot of bells, and safe passage for contracts that travel under beam and arch rather than under open sky. Domestic life collects itself around calm centers, and one such center receives the traveler at twilight, a fortified manor that looks outward where it must and inward where it prefers, its courtyard paved in worn terracotta squares that hold the day's warmth. A shallow stair climbs to a loggia upheld by round columns with leaf-carved capitals, and behind them opens a great room where a painted frieze runs beneath the timber ceiling, bright with patterns of vines, stars, and heraldic devices softened by candlelight. A hearth lined in glazed tile stands ready, the embers banked to a bed of ruby, and the hood draws smoke steadily so that the room keeps its clean sweetness, held together by the subtle salt of stone and the faint oil of burnished wood. Supper arrives in steady courses that need no flourish. Loaves crackle as they are broken. A shallow bowl of new oil gleams as green as spring under a wick's low flame. Sheep's cheese rests cool and pale against earthenware, and a jug of wine carries the friendly warmth of the slopes beyond the walls. From the arches, night air slides in with the fragrance of rosemary and laurel, and across the valley a bell answers another, their calls stepping through the dark at unhurried intervals, making a net of sound that holds the town lightly together. Servants pass with quiet competence, lifting shutters, settling bolts, and carrying a brazier to the upper floor where a narrow window looks toward the ridge road. Below, a stable cats its breath in straw, and in the yard, a dog circles once and settles. The traveller, dry at last and soothed, marks how shelter here is neither fortress nor palace alone, but a careful blending of both, a place where walls hold firm so that peace may gather, where stone proves its strength by bearing comfort as well as shield. The gate yields to a sheltered court, where utility and ease create a quiet balance. A circular wellhead rims the mouth of a cistern, its stone lip worn smooth by decades of rope, while a fig tree spreads broad leaves that sift the light and offer a green hush. Flagged paving bears the pale sheen of long use, and along one side a covered passage joins storerooms to a hall, arches stepping softly toward the main threshold. Above the court, a towered block presents narrow apertures and a crenellated walk, yet the proportions here temper severity, softened by tiled eaves and a modest loggia that receives the air. Wooden galleries braced with pegged joints skirt the upper level, allowing movement between chambers without crossing the open ground. Bales and jars occupy a ground floor range, sacks of wheat, amphorae of oil, and a chest-bound ledger secure behind a stout door, all part of a household whose defense serves trade as much as pride. From beyond the walls, the valley's faint bells count the evening, and a thread of rosemary drifting from a bed near the steps threads the air with resin and sun. The traveller, dusted from the road and bearing letters for patrons to the south, passes beneath an arch and into the cool of stone that holds the day's warmth like a remembered embrace. The great room reveals surfaces and structure shaped to gather people as well as to guard them. Plaster walls carry pigments in restrained bands, quiet reds and earth ochres, braided borders that frame a field of pale and set off a painted vine curling around a shield, the color softened by time into a matte glow. A hearth, faced in glazed tiles the color of chestnuts and honey, keeps a banked fire whose coals breathe rather than flare, and above it a hooded canopy draws smoke into the flue. Overhead beams of seasoned timber run the breadth of the hall, their shoulders notched and tenons wedged, fine joints cut with care that shows even in shadow. Underfoot, terracotta squares, laid in a running pattern, still hold the afternoon's heat, letting it seep back into the room as evening advances. Arched openings admit a last wash of light, softened by thin shutters that can be drawn when the wind rises, and a small loggia beyond offers a glimpse of cypress points darkening against a sinking sky. Benches and trestles stand along the walls, a long board cleared for the night's meal, where patterned cloth and a few bright ceramics from coastal kilns add a tempered cheer to the room's calm order. Evening work proceeds with unhurried care that signals a house accustomed to measured rhythms. A steward, ring of keys at the belt, oversees the barring of the outer door and the setting of bolts on the courtside shutters, while a younger attendant carries kindling to the hearth and stirs the embers until a steady glow returns. In the kitchen's tiled fireplace, a copper pot is moved off the hottest coals, and a stream of olive oil shines as it is poured into a shallow dish, catching the light in a quiet crescent. Bread is cut from a tall round loaf and set beside wedges of sheep's milk cheese, A slender carafe of mellow wine is brought from the coolness of a half-buried jar, its stopper wrapped in damp cloth. The traveler takes a place at the long table among the household's trusted staff and a pair of clerks attached to the merchant lord's business, passing plates without ceremony, speaking softly of roads and markets and the weather along the passes. Conversations are low and practical, yet gentle. A remark about the good year for olives, the safe return of a flock, the approaching fair where cloth and spices will be weighed on the iron scales kept in the storeroom. Through the open arches at the hall's far end, a trailed sprig of rosemary trembles in the evening draught, and the scent mingles with warm bread and the faint sweetness of figs kept to ripen on a windowsill. From the valley below, bells answer each other across the dusk until their echoes thin to a hush. The Manor's plan shows its double purpose as the household settles, every corridor linking protection with amenity. A narrow stair tucked behind the hearth climbs to chambers above, where pegs hold cloaks, a chest guards parchment and seals, and a table near a small arched window waits for morning light to fall upon it. A guest room is prepared without fuss, a bedstead with rope lattice tightened by a wooden key, a mattress of wool and straw, linen sheets aired by the fire, and a folded blanket dyed in muted madder. The terracotta floor yields its stored heat little by little, so that the room is warm without blaze, and the plastered walls, faintly tinted, keep the night from feeling bare. From a nearby landing, a door opens onto the wall walk, where the towers of neighboring households stand like patient companions across the ridge, their profiles square and steady against a pale band of sky. A single guard moves along the parapet, boots whispering on stone, pausing at intervals to look toward the fields and the distant road that loops among olive terraces. His presence reads as continuity rather than alarm. In this place, the hard geometry familiar to northern strongholds has been eased by habits of commerce and welcome, so that defense and comfort live alongside each other in the measured craft of beams, arches, and tiles. When the hour is marked again from below, it reaches the house like a soft assurance that the night is moving forward, and the courtyard fig, leaves now cool and still, seems to breathe with the resting stones. The great room is made ready with a long board drawn beneath painted plaster, where vines curl in cool greens and the silhouettes of saints watch over the household. Clay lamps and beeswax tapers steady the light, so that gold slips along the edge of a glazed pitcher and finds a soft shine on the tiles set before the hearth. Bread is cut into thick rounds, rough at the crust but tender within, the crumb close and fragrant from new grain threshed not long after the latest reaping. A shallow dish holds olive oil the color of green almonds, its surface catching small pools of radiance, while a sprinkle of salt and bruised fennel seeds darken the rim. Cheeses lie under linen, firm wheels from sheep's milk, and a younger, creamier piece that yields beneath the knife and leaves a cool tang on the tongue. The wine is poured in modest cups from a dark jug that smells of cellar and hillside, and when it is tasted, it softens the mouth with plums, a trace of dried herbs, and something like sun-warmed stone. Heat moves from the tiled hearth in gentle waves, touching knees and hands, and the crackle of olive wood falls into the same unhurried rhythm as the hush of servants crossing the terracotta floor. The first talk is of the road, because the road explains dust on the hem and the careful way a shoulder eases against the back of the bench. A steward asks about the mountain passes and the inns where pack trains gather, about bridges mended and fords washed out, and about which tolls are paid in coin and which tolls are paid in patience. Then the conversation turns to harvests, to olives knocked from boughs with poles and caught in nets, to wheat taken early on the lower slopes and later on the higher, to the press that ran late in the courtyard and stained the stone in dark circles. Letters follow the harvest, as they follow all seasons in these parts, and discreet mention is made of writs carried between courts, of seals already broken by the intended recipient, and of bindings stitched with bright silk, so they might be recognized by a waiting secretary. The traveler answers in careful measures, naming patrons in a way that honors rank and effort, and shaping learned matters into quiet phrases that satisfy curiosity without loosening confidences. Laughter comes in small, warm bursts, never loud enough to drown the murmur of the hall, and through the open arches of the loggia, air slides in from the slope outside, carrying rosemary, crushed by a passing boot or brushed by a hound's flank, and the slow toll of bells from the valley where fields narrow into a stream bed. Order governs the meal as surely as mortar binds the stone above, and the forms of courtesy protect as well as please. Hands are washed at a basin, water poured from a spouted ewer over fingers held at a graceful slope, and linen offered by a gentle-handed page who knows each place at the board. Bread is shared from the center, salt kept near the host, and knives are used with quiet economy. A spoon appears for a soft cheese set out after the first course, and the plate beneath is a shallow wooden trench that shows the grain of the tree. A copper brazier set near the farther arch holds small coals against the night air, and 2 dogs sleep against it, stirring only when a servant passes with another jug, the footfalls of her sandals feather soft. Beyond the arches, a square of darkness frames silvered olive leaves, and the bell marks the hour with unhurried strokes. Neither warning nor command, merely the counting of time as the valley keeps it. While the household speaks of grapes that must be picked before the next rain, and of a cousin apprenticed to a notary in a walled town, a guard makes a slow circuit along the parapet, footsteps hushed by worn stone, glancing inward through the window slits, then outward toward the lanes that coil around the ridge. Under this measured care, conversation loosens but never spills. The ritual itself holds the room, and the warmth at the traveler's back eases long-carried stiffness into a comfortable, listening stillness. Hospitality here has the shape of the house, strong in its edges, generous in its courts, open where the wind is sweet, and closed where the night might press closer. A platter is passed with dried figs and walnuts, the fruit tacky with late sun, the nuts cracked in a small iron tool whose dark metal tells of many seasons at table. The steward keeps an eye on portions, so all may eat their fill, and a cupbearer refills without haste, measuring from the jug by sight rather than mark, knowing the tilt that gives a companion 1 sip more than the last, and no more. A painted shield on the wall, simple colors, a charge that speaks of trade as much as arms, catches the light as it wavers, reminding that this hall belongs equally to account books and crossbows, to dowries and to corbelled battlements. Before the end, a small prayer of thanks is spoken in low voice, not to close the evening, but to bless its gentleness, and the clink of cup to board sounds like a soft consent to rest. Doors are set on their bars with a sound as calm as a breath. The chain at the courtyard gate settles against its post. and somewhere above, a watchman adjusts his cloak and listens to the last bell roll away over vines and cypress. In this ordered kindness, the scholar's thoughts finally slow, following the window's darkened arch toward a valley that promises nothing more than quiet, and the stones around him seem to hold that promise without effort, as if built to cradle both safety and sleep. Softened voices drift away as the household withdraws, and a thread of lamplight draws a path along the inner gallery. Tapestries and woven covers stir slightly in the night's faint movement, their patterns of vines and heraldic knots absorbing the glow into depths of red, green, and hushed gold. Small clay lamps lift pools of light onto the lime-washed walls, and each halo trembles a little, as if the plaster breathed with the timbers above. The beams, dark with age, give off a resinous sweetness when warmed by the day's heat, so that the passage smells of pine and a hint of beeswax from the polished rails. Footfalls on the brick pavers sound light and regular, softened by rush matting and the weight of evening, and the arcades reveal a square of sky where a single star steadies itself over the courtyard well. A carved doorframe here, an iron-bound chest there, and a narrow window glazed with small panes. These ordinary fittings, gathered at the edge of shadow, feel like the punctuation of an old sentence written by builders and merchants, and the gentle persistence of habit. A chamber waits beyond a threshold of smooth stone, and the last heat of the hearth lingers as a gentle presence. Tiles near the fire hold warmth like small suns, and the smoke has curled into the hood so cleanly that only a touch of cedar and ash perfumes the air. The bed is broad and low, with linen turned back over woolen blankets, and a coffer stands at the foot with its hinges made quiet by a touch of oil. Shutters are set a hand's width open. Through the slit the cypresses whisper with the breeze, and in the pauses a low call drifts from the gate tower where the night watch exchanges signals. From farther down the slope comes the softened counting of hours, bell to bell, the notes spreading like rings on water across the groves and terraces. A painted frieze runs along the upper wall, stylized leaves, a ribbon of beasts, a stripe of geometric knots, cool to the eyes and steadying to the mind, while embers in the grate mark the gradual passage toward rest with a faint rubescent pulse. Below, a porter takes his round with a care learned over many seasons, the chain of keys balanced so they do not sing against one another. He stops beneath the gallery to feel the latch of a side door settle into its hasp, then crosses the paving stones of the court to listen at the postern set in the great gate, where the oak answers with a mellow thud. From the kitchen, a coal in the baking hearth glows under ashes like a sunset preserved, and the smell of bread baked earlier clings to the air with the more delicate spice of rosemary tucked near the doorway. In the stores, earthen jars hold oil dark and calm, and staves of wine tuns creak slightly as the temperature of night draws down through plaster and stone. The stable speaks in gentlest grammar, an animal shifting weight, the brush of straw, a long restful breath, while above the roofline a patrolling figure pauses on the walk between merlons to look at the clean scatter of stars. In that pause, the whole house seems to draw in and release the same measured breath, steadied by walls that have grown room by room, from tower to dwelling, from redoubt to residence. The night settles further, and the sky deepens till its color feels almost tactile, a cloth spread and smoothed by invisible hands. In the traveler's room, a lamp is pinched out, and the darkness becomes amicable, not blank, but alive with the gentle contours left by the day, the mass of a chair, the cool geometry of the hearth, the curve of a jug on a stool. Through the open slit, the scent of crushed herbs rises from the courtyard garden. Rosemary and a little sage, still warm from afternoon sun, yet freshened by starlight. An owl calls from the olive terraces, understated and precise in its timing, and the reply from the far ridge returns like a measured echo across stone and leaves. The gate tower gives another short note, and then the footfalls on the wall walk recede, replaced by the quiet arithmetic of distant hours counted out in bronze. In this layered stillness, the room holds steady, gathering sleep as a harbor gathers evening tides, letting them curve and settle against the pilings of everyday things. Dreams come not as storm or spectacle, but as a slow untying of the day's knots, letting images and scents loosen and arrange themselves into a gentle procession. The long ridge with its towers becomes a line of candles floating in ink-dark water. A courtyard well becomes a polished disk of sky. A painted tendril on plaster lengthens with daybreak's promise and threads its way toward an unseen window. The body, accustomed to the strain of travel and the precise demands of patrons and letters, learns the cadence of the house, and breath by breath it matches that unhurried tempo. Somewhere below, the porter sits with his back to the gate's inner leaf and drowses, the keys at rest, while a cat threads a route near the warm stones of the oven. Out beyond the walls, vines hold dew in tiny beads along their edges, and the cypress needles catch it like a fine silver comb, preparing the garden for the first quiet stirrings. Morning is already folded into this silence, present in the way coals will take again to flame, in the clean boards of the bakery table awaiting flour, in the road that will reveal its soft traffic at first light. Before any change of color in the east, the house registers the approach of day as a change in rhythm. The watch's calls grow farther apart, and the birds shift in their sleep. The chamber keeps its comforting cool while the last ember wanes, and in that interval the air carries a mild trace of crushed grape and pressed olive from the stores, as if the season itself were breathing indoors. The traveler lies as one anchored, feeling the balanced weight of masonry, timber, tile and custom, all of it holding fast, yet allowing a slow drift toward dawn. Over the terraces, a breeze climbs gently, gathering hints of soil and fruit and distant water, and the towers on the ridge wait with the patience of things made to witness time. A baker will come to the courtyard, a stable hand will lead out a mule, and a servant will lift a bar from a door. But for now, those gestures are only threads woven into the calm fabric of the hour. In the quiet galleries, in the room of painted walls and banked ashes, in the courtyard where the well holds the star's reflection, the promise of day rests lightly, like a hand upon a shoulder, steadying the next step before it is taken. Night settles with an easy hand over the hills, and the stones seem to exhale the day's warmth back into the dark. In the high rooms, color lingers where the painted plaster holds a memory of sunlit hours, then yields to lamplight that trembles like a thought half-spoken. Below the rafters, the steady hush of a sleeping household gathers itself, a quiet more eloquent than counsel, more durable than oath or seal. In these walls, purpose has learned to bow to grace. The masonry still knows the old language of watch and ward, yet it also knows how to cradle music, laughter, and the faint scrape of a pen. Timber screens soften breezes, Tiled hearths release a slow fragrance of ash and bread, and arches open onto balconies where night air moves with the clean breath of rosemary and stone. Fortitude and welcome sit together at the same long table, and neither seems a stranger. Beyond the courtyard, towers lift like tall candles, keeping company with the stars. Their narrow windows do not glare or threaten tonight. They blink with small, companionable flames, suggestive of long work well done and letters patiently folded away. Paths wind downhill among silvered olive leaves, then vanish into the valley where the bell notes drift and pool among the vines. Somewhere, a late cart rolls softly over rutted earth, then is gone. Even the dogs have abandoned their arguments. Quietness takes the measure of everything and finds nothing amiss. Here the measure of worth leans toward what endures gently. The curve of a fired tile, the discipline of a well-laid course of stone, the balance of staircase and loggia, the rhythm of terrace and field. Wealth has been asked to wear a lighter garment, one that allows the hand to rest and the eye to wander, to meet color and proportion without haste. Knowledge sits nearby, unarmed and unafraid, content to be a guest under roofs that have learned to shelter not only bodies, but thought. The night air holds a taste of earth and oil, the faint echo of a hymn carried from the valley's shadowed church, the soft ring of metal cooling at a forge now dark. A moth flutters through the half-closed shutters and settles on the whitewash, pausing as if to listen. In the courtyard cistern, a single drop falls, measured and sure, as though time itself were being counted with kindness. Some distances become smaller in such a place. The long road that crossed snows and passes folds into a mere crease of memory, while the immediate world grows wide and hospitable. The mind finds that it can move without armor, and the heart that it can linger without watchfulness. Stone, once taught only to brace and resist, learns to carry light and sleep. When the last cup is set aside and the embers gather themselves into a quiet red, the night completes its work. The towers stand at ease, the hills hold their breath without strain, and the painted walls, dimly luminous, seem to float in a hush, neither wholly within nor wholly beyond the room. Above, constellations pass like patient caravans, unhurried, untroubled, indifferent to border and banner, attentive only to their own serene geometry. Nothing presses, nothing insists. The house breathes, the valley listens, and the darkness settles into a kindness that feels almost like music. Within that calm, words fall away, and rest arrives as softly as the scent of rosemary through an open arch, lingering, gentle and sure.